WrestleMania 42 is only 6 weeks away, and it is shaping up to be the biggest one ever. Because according to reports, WWE is planning between 14 and 16 matches across both nights. But even with all those matches, it begs the question, which WWE superstars will be left off of the show? Let's speculate. I'm Brandon, this is Wrestlin' Talk, and today we're going to be predicting every WWE superstar's chances of making WrestleMania 42. And the best way to do that is with a tier list. So as you can see here, I have split the tier list into 4 categories because I really couldn't come up with a fifth. Our categories are 100% lock, very likely, long shot, and on the bench. They pretty much go without explaining, but I'll explain them anyway. 100% lock means you are totally going to be on the WrestleMania card, no ifs, ands, or buts. Very likely means they're very likely to make the WrestleMania card, but it's not a sure thing. Long shot are for the superstars who really don't have anything going on at the moment. There's no storylines or feuds they're involved in, so it seems unlikely that they're gonna make the Mania card. However, there are options out there in the ether. There is a path for them if WWE chooses to go down it. And then of course on the bench are for the superstars who have absolutely no shot of making WrestleMania this year. For this video, we'll be looking at superstars across Raw and Smackdown because NXT, let's be honest, none of them are going to make WrestleMania anyway. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with the free agents. Superstars who have not currently signed with either Raw or Smackdown. And really, there's only 3 of them. Alright, first up we have Brock Lesnar. I'm just going to cut to the chase. This guy, it's 100% lock that he's going to be at WrestleMania because him and Paul Heyman had a segment on Raw a few weeks back where they basically said Brock Lesnar was going to have an open challenge at WrestleMania this year. So we don't know necessarily who's going to accept that challenge, but we do know that Brock Lesnar will be at WrestleMania to fulfill his end of the bargain with this whole open challenge, so he is absolutely going to be there. He's on the poster for Mania. This is probably going to be his last Mania ever. Brock is 100% lock. Next up, Danhausen. Now, I can see Danhausen having a segment on WrestleMania, having a fun backstage with maybe R-Truth or The Miz. But for this video, we're specifically looking at matches. Will you have a match at WrestleMania? And I don't think Danhausen is going to have a match at Mania, so he's on the bench. Now, out of the 3 free agents, this is the most interesting one, Obafemi. The way I see it is Obafemi is a big star. He's getting big reactions. I think WWE would be wise to include him on the WrestleMania card, but realistically, there are only 2 paths for him. Path number 1 is the one that all the fans want, which is for Obafemi to answer Brock Lesnar's open challenge and face him at WrestleMania. Option 2 is he goes after the IC title in a multi-man match, which is currently held by Penta. I can honestly see either one of those happening. He's currently feuding with Rusev. I don't think that's going to lead to a Mania match. I think that's just going to be dealt with on Raw. However, similar to Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania 40, I could see WWE bench Obafemi this year because they want his first WrestleMania to be a big deal where he takes on someone for a world title in a big match. Because if you remember WrestleMania 40, Tiffany had just moved up to the main roster. We thought we were going to get her in some match at WrestleMania, but then they left her off the card because according to Tiffany, they wanted her first Mania to be a big deal, which is why at WrestleMania 41, we got her versus Charlotte for the WWE Women's Championship. I could absolutely see WWE doing that with Obafemi too. But given the fact that there's not a lot of excitement around this year's Mania, ticket sales aren't as good as they were last year, WWE might be smart to just give fans what they want. Give us Oba versus Brock, or at the very least, Oba competing for the IC title. I'm gonna say it's very likely Oba makes WrestleMania, but he's not 100% lock. Someone who is 100% lock is the new women's IC champion, AJ Lee. She won the title from Becky Lynch at Elimination Chamber. I think she's absolutely going to hold on to it until WrestleMania, where she defends it against most likely Becky Lynch and then loses it back to her there. So AJ Lee, 100% lock. She's one of the biggest names in the women's division, and I do not see her losing the IC title before Mania, so she's a lock. She's gonna be there. Akira Tozawa, sorry, dude, you're on the bench. Maybe there's a world where him and Otis get involved in a big multi-team match for the tag titles, but WWE is already planning to do that for the women's tag titles this year. I don't think they want two giant multi-tag team matches. So because of that, Tozawa, you're on the bench. Next up is Asuka. I think WWE has a couple of options here. The biggest one is her and Kairi Sane go after the women's tag titles in a big multi-person match. However, you could also put a pin in the Io Sky versus Asuka feud, which has been going on since, Crown Jewel last year? And you could do Io Sky versus Asuka, nothing on the line at WrestleMania. Personally, that's what I would like to see. I don't see WWE doing that, though. However, I do think her and Kairi being in that women's tag match, which they're clearly setting up right now, it's going to be at least a fatal 4-way, maybe even a 6-pack ladder match. I think it is very likely that Asuka makes WrestleMania, although not a lock, because maybe the Kabuki Warriors are left off of that multi-team match, which would be a mistake. Next up, Austin Theory. Alright, I could absolutely see him and Logan Paul teaming up to go after the Usos for the World Tag Team titles. However, I don't think that match is a lock for WrestleMania, but it is possible, it's likely. WWE's pushing Theory right now with the Vision. I'm gonna say very likely, because I do think him and Logan Paul going after the Usos makes sense. However, if Braun Breaker's not back to face Seth, Logan Paul's gotta be the one to face Seth at Mania, and then at that point, what does Theory do? Now he's not on the card at all. So really, Theory's chances of making the WrestleMania card rest entirely on Braun Breaker, and if he returns or not. And I don't know if Braun Breaker's going to return in time, so do I bump Theory down to long shot? Man, that's a tough one. I'm going to tentatively keep him at very likely, although he is really riding that line. He's either very likely or a long shot. Given that WWE has been pushing the Vision for a while now, I could see him and Logan Paul doing something together. Next up is Bayley, who I don't see going after the IC title. The only path to Mania I see for Bayley this year is her and Lyra getting involved in that multi-team match going after the women's tag titles. And given that Bayley was left off of WrestleMania last year, I don't think WWE is going to want to make the same mistake twice. That would be terrible. However, when you look at that women's tag team match, there are a few teams who I think are absolute locks, like they are definitely going to be in that match. Then there are other teams who I think are just strong contenders to be in that match. Bayley and Lyra are on that line. They're not 100% locked to be in that match, but they're not just very likely, because I do think they are very popular baby faces. They need something to do. I'm not going to say 100% locked, but Bayley is very likely going to be on the Mania card this year, because her and Lyra will most likely be in that match. Next up, Becky Lynch. This is 100% lock. Becky Lynch is one of the biggest stars in the women's division. You need her at the biggest show of the year doing something, and it just so happens that this something is going to be her facing the person that's right next to her on this tier list, and that's AJ Lee. I think Becky is absolutely going to face AJ Lee in a rematch for the IC title at WrestleMania. They might put some other people in that match too, although I don't think so. I think it's just going to be one-on-one round 2. If they're smart, they would make it a stipulation match, maybe a Sin City street fight, and most likely Becky Lynch is going to win the IC title back from AJ Lee, because after Mania, we're probably not going to see AJ again until SummerSlam. But yes, Becky Lynch, absolutely going to be on the Mania card. Next up is Bravo, one of the Los Americanos. I don't know if this is Pete Dunne or Tyler Bate. I get the two of them confused. I think it's Pete Dunne. Either way, I do think absolutely he will be involved with the WrestleMania if they do Grande versus Grande, Mask versus Mask, but I don't think he will be in the match itself. So because of that, technically he's on the bench, but I would fully expect him to be at the show and do something in the Grande versus Grande match. This makes me think I should have added a 5th category like will be involved but not have a match, but we're too far in at this point, and technically he will be on the bench. Next up is Brie Bella, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. She is 100% a lock for WrestleMania. The reason Brie Bella came back at the Rumble is because WWE wants her and Nikki Bella Bella to go after the women's tag titles at WrestleMania. WWE wants to add the Bella star power to that match. Again, out of all of those tag teams that could be competing for the women's tag titles, the Bellas and another team who I'll get to later, to me, are the absolute locks to be in that match. Next up, this is the big question mark, Braun Breaker. So Seth Rollins is back now. Apparently, according to Adam Pearce, he's not medically cleared to compete yet, but I think it stands to reason that before Mania, he will be. So it begs the question, who is Seth Rollins going to face at Mania? At the moment, it seems like Logan Paul, but we have already seen that before a couple years ago. And we all know that the more interesting match from a story standpoint is Seth versus Braun Breaker. However, Braun Breaker did get injured on the episode of Raw after the Rumble when he flipped over a table and gave himself a hernia. Apparently, they performed surgery on that right away, and according to reports, he is in extensive physical therapy right now, trying to get back for Mania. So all of this makes me think that it is possible that Braun Breaker is back before Mania. I could absolutely see a situation where on the Raw before Mania, Braun Breaker returns, spears Seth Rollins, and there you go, the match is the following Saturday or Sunday. I could also just as easily see a world where Braun Breaker doesn't come back and Seth Rollins just faces Logan Paul. So because of that, I have to wonder, is it a long shot or is it very likely? I want to say very likely, but I'm not a medical expert. I don't know the recovery time for a hernia. I'm just going to go ahead and say long shot. Because if you ask WWE doctors, that's probably what they would say too. It's a long shot, but it's possible. However, now that I put Braun Breaker in long shot and Austin Theory in very likely, I think I contradicted myself, because if Braun is a long shot, that means it's Seth versus Logan, which means Austin Theory is also a long shot. So I think I'm gonna have to put Theory down in long shot too. It's a long shot, but if Braun comes back, then Theory's in too, because then you can do Seth, Braun, and Usos versus Logan and Theory. However, if Braun's not available, then it's going to be Logan, Seth, and Theory's just going to be in Logan's corner, which is not a match. And while we're at it, let's talk about the other member of the Vision who's currently out with an injury, and that is Bronson Reed. I think he is firmly on the bench. I believe his injury was a torn bicep. Usually those are a 6 to 9 month recovery time. And even if you're going crazy with PT and you come back in record time, I feel like that would be like, what, 3 months instead of 6? All of those potential timelines take us beyond WrestleMania, so Bronson Reed, I think, is firmly out for WrestleMania this year. Next up, Brutus Creed. You're on the bench, man. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. WWE has done nothing with the Creed brothers in like years at this point. I don't see them facing the Usos, so you're on the bench. Chad Gable. Okay, so there's Chad Gable, and then there's also El Grande Americano. As far as Chad Gable being on the WrestleMania card this year, he's technically still out with an injury, so I'm going to go with on the bench. However, if during the Grande versus Grande match, the original El Grande Americano loses and then takes off his mask, revealing himself to be Chad Gable, does that count as a Chad Gable match? I don't know. I'm just going to say on the bench. CM Punk, 100% lock. Him and Roman are going to main event night 2. That's not changing. Cruz del Toro, that's 100% on the bench. No explanation needed. Dominic Mysterio. Well, he's not the IC champion anymore, but I do think he will absolutely be on the Mania card because he's one of the biggest stars in WWE, and I do think the match is looking like it's going to be Dom versus Finn. Do I say that's 100% lock, though, or just very likely? I almost want to say that it's 100% lock. The match hasn't been confirmed yet, but like, that's where they're building to, right? And even if they don't do that match, I could see Dom facing Penta for the IC title again, or maybe doing something with his dad, Ray. So I'm actually going to say that Dom Mysterio is 100% a lock. Like, he's going to be on the Mania card. Finn, might be a little bit below him. I'll explain that once we get to Finn. Next up is Dragon Lee. I'm tempted to say on the bench, but I'm going to put him in long shot, and I'll explain why. There are a lot of opportunities for WWE to do something with the Dragon Lee if they see fit. He could go after Penta for the IC title. He could get involved in the Grande versus Grande situation. He could do something with Rey Mysterio. He could face Gunther again since Gunther removed his mask. He could even do something with the tag titles if he teams up with Rey Fenix or whoever. So I cannot say that he is firmly on the bench, but it's also not likely he's going to make the card, so I'm going to go ahead and say it's a long shot for Dragon Lee, but I could see a path. Next up, we have both El Grande Americanos, the Chad Gable one and the Ludwig Kaiser one. I think I'm going to put both of them in very likely. I think WWE is clearly building to a mask versus mask match between them, since every time they interact with each other in the ring, one of them is trying to take the other's mask off. So I do think this is going to end at WrestleMania. I'm not going to say a lock though, because they might just put it on the Raw after WrestleMania too. Next up is Eric. Sorry, you're on the bench. And now we get to Finn Balor, who I do think will be facing Dom Mysterio at WrestleMania, and I do think that match will be the return of the Demon. However, I'm going to put Finn Balor in very likely instead of 100% lock, and that is simply because he's not as big a star as Dom Mysterio. And also, Dom Mysterio has other options, whether that's going after Penta for the IC title or doing something with Rey Mysterio or whoever. Finn Balor really only has one path to WrestleMania right now, and that's facing Dom. So I'm going to say Finn Balor is very likely. Grayson Waller should be on the bench. I almost want to put him in long shot though, because he was Seth Rollins' stand-in during the whole Masked Man thing. However, Seth Rollins is back now. There is a possibility that he gets all of the people who have been his decoys as the Masked Men to do something at WrestleMania, but will that be a match? Will we get Seth Rollins and Grayson Waller versus Logan Paul and Austin Theory? I don't think so, but I'm gonna say long shot. But he's really teetering, like he could be on the bench. Next up is Gunther. After the Royal Rumble where he retired AJ Styles, and after Saturday night's main event when he retired John Cena, I think WWE sees Gunther as a must-have for WrestleMania this year. However, his opponent feels up in the air. At this point, given what happened with Dragon Lee on Raw, it feels like Gunther's WrestleMania opponent is going to be Rey Mysterio, where he probably retires Rey Mysterio, or at the very least, does something to beat him and embarrass him. So I think similar to Dom, Gunther's gonna be at WrestleMania. It just comes down to what's he gonna do. And Triple H loves Gunther, and he will find him something to do. I'm gonna go ahead and say a lock. I think Gunther will be at WrestleMania this year. I think it's gonna be Rey. However, it could also be him answering the Brock Lesnar Open Challenge. Ivar on the bench. Ivy Nile. Unfortunately, I'm going on the bench. The only thing I could see for her is going after the IC title, which I don't think is gonna happen. So unfortunately, on the bench. Next up is Io Sky, who at the moment doesn't seem to have a path to WrestleMania. She's most likely going to be facing AJ Lee for the IC title on an episode of Raw, and I don't think she's going to win that because Becky Lynch is going to get involved and wonk the finish. After that, though, I think there are plenty of options for Io Sky. One of them is her versus Asuka, nothing on the line, just ending that feud. Another, and this one makes more sense, is her going over to SmackDown to help Rhea Ripley with Jade Cargill, but while on SmackDown, she gets involved in a feud with the US champion, Julia. According to reports, that is the plan for Io Sky as of right now, her versus Julia for the US title, and it makes sense. Coming off of WrestleMania 41, where Io Sky had like the moment of the weekend, I don't think you want her just going in a non-title match. So I think her winning the US championship makes a lot of sense. It's a big moment similar to last year, although not as big. So I'm gonna say Io Sky is very likely going to make the Mania card. The reason I'm not gonna put her in 100% lock, and this is gonna be crazy, I could see WWE do an angle where Jade Cargill destroys Io Sky in front of Rhea Ripley, and then that gives Jade Cargill some heat as a heel, and then Rhea Ripley can use that as fuel to defeat her at WrestleMania. Honestly, I hate that, but I can see it, and I think you can too. So because of that, I'm gonna keep Io Sky in very likely. Ideally, I'd put her in lock because she's just such a big star, but I keep thinking of that angle, and I hate it, but I think they might do it, so I'm just gonna say very likely for now. And also, her versus Julia isn't really a big match because Julia doesn't really have a whole lot of equity behind her right now. So while I think that match is going to happen, I don't think it's like a sure thing. This is a lock. Let's do it. Next up is JD McDonough. I'm teetering between Longshot and On the Bench. Him and Finn could go after the tag titles, although I don't see that happening. Could he get involved in something else? Not really. Maybe something with the IC title. I'm going to say Longshot, but it's a long shot. Next up, Javon Evans, who, similar to JD McDonough, I can see going after the IC title. However, and I'll say this when I get to Penta, I don't think it's a sure thing that the IC title is defended at WrestleMania this year. So because of that, I'm gonna say long shot. Next up, we got the World Tag Team Champions, Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso. They're the Usos, they're giant names. You gotta assume they're gonna be on the Mania card. Although, their only opponents who I can think of right now are Logan Paul and Austin Theory, the Vision. And if Braun Breaker doesn't come back and Seth has to face Logan, what the hell do the Usos do? I don't think they would be left off of the card altogether, but the men's tag division across both shows is just dead. So I'm gonna say it's very likely they make the card defending against someone, but I don't really know who. Next up, Joaquin Wilde on the bench, Julius Creed on the bench, Kairi Sane. The only way I think Kairi Sane gets on the Mania card this year is her and Asuka going after the women's tag titles in the multi-team match. I don't see Kairi getting involved to make anything a triple threat or a fatal four-way, but WWE is clearly teasing a Kairi Sane, I guess, face turn, but basically her just standing up to Asuka. I'm gonna say that Kairi Sane is very likely going to make Mania this year. I think her and Asuka going after the tag titles makes a lot of sense. Kofi Kingston. So Xavier Woods is out with an injury, but even if he wasn't, I don't know if they would be going after the tag titles this year. So because of that, I actually think Kofi Kingston, I hate to say it, I think he might be on the bench this year because Xavier Woods is on the bench. Maybe he goes after the IC title in a multi-person match, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna say on the bench. I don't see the New Day making the Mania card this year. Unless Xavier Woods comes back before Mania, and then maybe you do something with them and the Usos, but like, is that a Mania match or is that just a Raw match? I might be wrong on this. He could very well be a long shot, but I'm gonna say on the bench. Next up, LA Knight. So when it comes to LA Knight, there are a few options, but none of them seem that possible. One is he answers the Brock Lesnar Open Challenge, which, according to reports, was the plan. But fans clearly do not want to see that match, so WWE just might not do it. I could also see him going after the IC title, but that's a big if, because the IC title I don't think is a lock to be defended at Mania this year. I'll talk more about that when I get to Penta. Maybe he could do something with the Usos where it's him and the Usos versus the Vision or something, but the Vision is only 2 guys, so I don't really see that happening either. Ideally, we would get LA Knight versus Chris Jericho, but at this point, I don't think Chris Jericho's returning to WWE, at least for WrestleMania. Maybe Chris Jericho returns on the Raw after Mania, or just down the line, or maybe not at all. But because all of the options for LA Knight seem so questionable, I gotta be honest with you, I'm gonna go long shot. And that pains me to say as an LA Knight fan, I just don't think he's very likely going to make the card this year. He hasn't been featured a whole lot on TV. I think it's very likely that he does not answer the Brock challenge. They give that spot to Oba. And at that point, I feel like the best thing for him is going after the IC title in a multi-man match, which I guess I could see, maybe. I also think it's likely that he's just left off because that's what WWE kind of does with LA Knight. It sucks to say, but yeah, long shot. Next up is Liv Morgan, 100% a lock. It's going to be her versus Stephanie for the Women's World Championship. Next up is Logan Paul. 100% lock. Logan Paul is one of the biggest stars in WWE, similar to a Gunther or a Dom Mysterio. Even though their plans aren't locked down right now, you know they're going to be on the card. And with Logan Paul, there are options. It's either him versus Seth, or him in theory versus the Usos for the tag titles. And honestly, even if both of those matches fell through, it's Logan Paul. Similar to Gunther or Dom, he's gonna do something at WrestleMania. So yeah, 100% lock. Ludwig Kaiser, similar to Chad Gable, I'm going to say on the bench because he will be as El Grande Americano, but obviously one of them will lose that mask versus mask match, and one of them will be revealed to be their true selves. But whatever, I'm just going to say on the bench, whatever. Lyra Valkyria, similar to Bayley, I'm going to say very likely. I think it makes a lot of sense for her and Bayley to enter that women's tag match. Maxine Dupree and Natty. Yeah, so there's potential that they get involved in AJ Lee versus Becky Lynch for the IC title. Maybe make it a fatal four-way or a triple threat with one of them. To be honest though, I don't know what either of them add to that match because the feud between AJ and Becky is very much a singles feud. Natty and Maxine only got involved briefly on an episode of Raw. I feel like their feud is more so going to take place on Raw, either on the Raw Go Home show or the Raw After Mania. There is a possibility they get involved in that AJ Becky match if they want to add a fatal four-way to the card. So I'm going to say for both Maxine Dupree and Natty, it's a long shot, but maybe. Next up is Nikki Bella, similar to Brie Bella, 100% lock. The Bellas will absolutely be going after the women's tag titles at WrestleMania. Will they win? Probably not. I feel like they're going to stick around for a bit and win the titles down the line. But both Nikki and Brie will absolutely be on the card. Next up is Otis, similar to Tozawa, going to be on the bench. And now we get to Penta, the new IC champion. Okay, so here's the thing. I want to say 100% lock. Penta is going to be at WrestleMania. He's going to walk in as the IC champ and defend it against whoever. But even with the reported 16 matches across both nights, it doesn't look like Penta is a lock to defend the title at Mania. Because let's just do some stupid math here. You got Roman Punk, Cody Randy, Liv Stephanie, Rhea Jade, Grande versus Grande, Drew versus Jacob, women's tag team title match, Brock versus, let's say, Oba or LA Knight, Seth versus, let's say, Logan or Braun, AJ Lee versus Becky Lynch, now we're at 10, Dom Finn, that's 11. Usos versus whoever, now we're at 12. There have been reports about Io versus Julia, that's 13. There have been reports about, Sami Zayn, Trick Williams, that's 14. Gunther Ray, I don't know if I've said that already, but that would be 15. So if you add all of those matches, that leaves one opening for 8 matches per night. And to me, that match is going to be one of two things. Either a match for the IC Championship, currently held by Penta, or something with Tiffany Stratton, because she's also a big name who WWE might want on the card in some form or fashion. So because of that, I can't say he's a lock. He is the IC champion though, so do I say very likely or long shot? Because there are so many options for who Penta can face, and he's such a big name, I'm gonna say very likely. But that's really riding the line between very likely and long shot, because I can also see WWE doing something else with that spot. So I'm gonna say very likely, but I'm not so confident. Raquel Rodriguez, this is an interesting one. I don't think she's gonna be going after the IC title, that's AJ Becky. I don't think she's gonna be added to Liv versus Stephanie, although I definitely think she'll be involved in the match. It really just comes down to, are her and Roxanne Perez gonna get involved in that women's tag title match? And I gotta be honest with you, I don't think so, because WWE hasn't really been setting that up in any meaningful way, given that Roxanne is currently out of action after a recent surgery. And I don't know if Roxanne is going to be back in time for WrestleMania, and if she's not, that means Raquel is just going to be walking into Mania in support of Liv. So because I don't know whether Roxanne is going to be healthy in time, and even if she is, I don't know if they're going to get involved in that women's tag title match, because there are so many teams who I think are already involved with that I don't think Judgment Day is a lock to be there. Honestly, with Raquel, man, I think I have to say long shot, because it's kind of entirely riding on Roxanne Perez's status. So yeah, I'm gonna go long shot. Next up is Rayo. I think he's gonna be on the bench, similar to Bravo. And now we get Rey Mysterio, who I think is definitely going to be facing Gunther at this point. But even if it's not Gunther, it could be Dom, or it could be getting involved with the Grande versus Grande match, or maybe we get Rey versus Penta for the IC title. I think it's very likely that Rey makes the card, so I'm going to put him in very likely. But also, unlike Dom or Gunther, WWE is not actively pushing Rey Mysterio right now, so I'm not going to put him in 100% lock. We were just talking about her, Roxanne Perez. I don't know if she's going to be back in time, so I'm going to put her right next to Raquel in long shot. And again, even if she is back in time, when I look at that women's tag title scene, you got the Irresistible Forces, the Bellas, Kabuki Warriors, Bayley and Lyra, Charlexa, and then you got a 6 team, which I think could be Judgment Day, it could be Julia Kiana, or they could remove one of those 5 teams I just mentioned and make it a fatal 4-way. That way they don't need to make it a ladder match. So there's a little bit up in the air with Judgment Day at WrestleMania. But at the very least, I do think they will both be in Liv Morgan's corner. Next up is R-Truth, who I think may very well win the WWE tag titles with Damian Priest. But even if that happens, are they gonna make the Mania card? No, I'm going to say R-Truth is on the bench this year. If they win the tag titles, I think they would defend it on the Smackdown Go Home show. Next up is Rusev. I'm going to say long shot, because if Penta has a multi-person match for the IC title, I can see Rusev getting involved there. Maybe Oba's in that match too. But it's also just as likely that WWE leaves him off the card completely. Next up, Seth Rollins. Absolute lock. He will be at WrestleMania. He wouldn't have returned at the Elimination Chamber if they didn't already know that he would be cleared in time to compete at WrestleMania. It just comes down to who's he facing, Logan Paul or Braun Breaker. Next up is Sheamus, who's currently out with an injury. I don't see him returning anytime soon. I'm going to say on the bench. Could he return? Maybe, but I just don't see it. He hasn't been on the WrestleMania card in a few years, I think. Next up, Stephanie Vaquer, 100% a lock. Her versus Liv for the Women's World title. Next up is Xavier Woods, out with an injury. I think similar to Kofi Kingston, he is on the bench. Even if Xavier was healthy, I don't think they would be facing the Usos at WrestleMania. I just don't see it. And the last person from Raw is Zoe Stark, also out with an injury, so unfortunately on the bench. Now let's move on to SmackDown, starting with Alba Fire, who I think is going to be on the bench. If Chelsea Green gets on the card, and that's a big if, Alba Fire will definitely be in her corner and get involved in the match that way, but she's not going to make the card herself. Similarly, Aleister Black, I am also saying is going to be on the bench. The only way I could see him getting on the Mania card is going after the US title, and I gotta be honest, I think it's a long shot for the US title to be defended at Mania anyway. Nor do I see Aleister Black being the one to challenge Carmelo Hayes for the US title. So yeah, he's on the bench. I don't think he's making Mania this year. Similarly, Alex Shelley with the Motor City Machine Guns, I don't see him making it either. Now we get to Alexa Bliss of Charlexa, and I definitely think Charlexa will be at WrestleMania this year, competing for the women's tag titles. But even if they don't, even if they're not a part of that multi-team match, you could do Alexa versus Charlotte if you wanted to pull the trigger on that with just 6 weeks to Mania. I don't think they're going to do that. I think Charlexa will be going after the tag titles together, and they're two of the biggest names in WWE. And the Charlexa gimmick is so over. It's one of the best things they're doing on SmackDown right now. So I'm going to say 100% lock. I think we will see Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair compete at WrestleMania in a match. At this point, I think it's going to be the women's tag title match. Next up is Angel. He's on the bench. Angelo Dawkins, I think he's also on the bench. Apollo Crews, I think is also on the bench. Axiom, I think is on the bench. Berto, on the bench. B-Fab, on the bench. Bianca Belair, on the bench. I think it's very likely that she returns at WrestleMania, maybe cost Jade Cargill the win to Rhea Ripley. I think that would be freaking phenomenal, because in that moment, Bianca would be setting up a potential match with both Jade Cargill and Rhea Ripley. I would absolutely love that, but that doesn't mean she's going to be on the card. So unfortunately, Bianca's on the bench. Candice LeRae, also on the bench. And now we get to Carmelo Hayes, who is currently the men's US champion. Will that championship make the WrestleMania card, though? Honestly, I think it's very unlikely. Currently, the match they're setting up is Carmelo Hayes versus Ilya Dragunov. Honestly, I think that match happens on the Smackdown go-home before Mania. Could it make Mania? It's a long shot. It's a long shot. I'm going to put him in long shot. I kind of just want to put him in on the bench, though, because I really do think that match is going to happen on Smackdown, but I could be wrong. They could do it at WrestleMania, and if they do Melo versus Trick, then it could definitely make Mania. I just don't think they're going to do that. Charlotte Flair, similar to Alexa Bliss, I think it's a lock. They are going to be at WrestleMania. They're two of the biggest stars in WWE. Their gimmick is super over. I think Charlexa, the Irresistible Forces, the Bellas, I think those teams are like locks. And then we get into some of the others like Bayley, Lyra, Kabuki Warriors, all that. Chelsea Green is currently out with an injury, but according to her, it's not a serious injury and she should be back soon. So assuming she's ready to go for WrestleMania, I think it's possible. The match that makes the most sense is her versus Tiffany Stratton, nothing on the line. Do I see WWE actually booking that though? Not really. So I'm just gonna say Chelsea Green is a long shot to make Mania. I could see them do her versus Tiffany. I could also just see them have her do a funny backstage segment or maybe like host the show or something. Chris Sabin, he is going to be on the bench. I don't think any of the SmackDown men's tag teams are going to make the Mania card this year. Cody Rhodes, 100% a lock. He is now the WWE champion, so him versus Randy is absolutely happening. Damian Priest, this is sad, but he's going to be on the bench this year. I don't see him going after the US title. I do see him and R-Truth winning the tag titles, but I don't see them making the Mania card. I think they would defend those tag titles on the SmackDown Go-Home show. I just think given the WrestleMania matches that are currently being reported on, I don't see him and Truth fitting in there this year, which that sucks because this dude had an amazing moment at WrestleMania 40, but since then it's just been this constant drop-off. If I were WWE, I would turn him heel like now. But also, maybe this teaming with R-Truth will work. I think that would go a long way in getting Damian over again. But as far as this Mania goes, I don't think he's going to be on it. Similarly, I don't think Dexter Lumis is going to make the Mania card as well. Now we got Drew McIntyre, who just lost the WWE Championship, and I think the match is going to be him versus Jacob Fatu. And honestly, I think that match is kind of a lock at this point, and even if it wasn't, they were already kind of talking about doing Cody versus Randy versus Drew versus Jacob in a fatal four-way. So WWE was clearly planning on Drew being at Mania this year. So even though he's not the champion anymore, I think it's a lock that he's going to compete there. Elton Prince, unfortunately, is out with an injury. He's on the bench. Eric Rowan, I don't see the Wyatt Six having a big presence at WrestleMania this year at all. I think he's also on the bench. Julia, I want to say long shot, but at this point, I actually might go very likely because she's the US champ. You can do Io versus Julia. You can do Julia versus Tiffany, who's already on SmackDown. And you can even do Julia and Kiana getting involved in the women's tag title match. I think, honestly, with all of those options, it's very likely that Julia makes the Mania card this year. Ilya Dragunov, similar to Carmelo Hayes, it's a long shot. The only way I could see it is Ilya versus Carmelo for the US title. And like I said, I think that's just going to happen on SmackDown. Jacob Fatu, 100% lock. I think it's going to be him versus Drew. That has pretty much been set in stone at this point. Jade Cargill, 100% a lock. Her versus Rhea for the world title. JC Mateo, that's going to be on the bench. I don't see the MFTs being really involved at Mania either. I guess they could do MFTs versus Wyatts, but again, that just feels like a SmackDown match. Joe Gacy, I'm going to go on the bench. Johnny Gargano on the bench. Jordynne Grace, she just got injured before an episode of SmackDown. Who knows how serious it is? Even if she wasn't injured, I could only see her doing something with the US title this year. But now that she's been injured, I'm going to go ahead and say Jordynne Grace might be firmly on the bench this year. Because even if she comes back from her injury in time, there are other bigger plans for the US title, Julia versus Tiffany or Io. So I'm going to say on the bench. Kevin Owens also on the bench. I don't think he's going to be back in time for WrestleMania, although I do think he might come back later on this year. Kiana James could team with Julia to go after the women's tag titles, but if Julia is defending the US title alone at WrestleMania, Kiana's just going to be in her corner for that match. So because of that, I'm going to group Kiana James similarly with Raquel and Roxanne, where they could get involved in the women's tag title match, but it's not a sure thing. So Kiana James, I'm going to say, is a long shot. Kit Wilson is up next. So I could absolutely see Kit Wilson just having a funny moment backstage, but I could also see him having an impromptu match. Maybe he is the first one to answer Brock Lesnar's open challenge, calls him toxic, Brock destroys him in 2 seconds, and then Brock has another open challenge, and that's when Obafemi comes down. Or maybe Kit Wilson just interrupts the show, calls everyone toxic, and then, I don't know, Stone Cold Steve Austin comes down as a surprise WrestleMania moment and kicks Kit Wilson's ass, and that's it. So because any of those situations can become an impromptu match, I'm going to say Kit Wilson is in the long shot category. I'm not going to say very likely because it's very likely that WWE just doesn't include him on the show at all, but I think they'd be wise to include him in some form or fashion where he gets his ass kicked by one of the big tough dudes. Next up is Lash Legend of the Irresistible Forces, currently one of the women's tag team champions. I think it is 100% a lock that her and Nia Jax walk into WrestleMania as the women's tag champions. Next up is Matt Cardona on the bench. I'm sorry, I do not see him making WrestleMania this year. WWE's just not doing anything with him. Similarly, Michin, I think, is also on the bench, and similar to Angelo Dawkins, unfortunately, I think Montez Ford is also on the bench. Man, they have fumbled Montez Ford so bad, and I still think there is a main event guy in him. It's always been in there. They just haven't pushed him for whatever reason. Next up is Naomi, who is obviously going to be on the bench this year. I honestly don't see her returning at all this year, maybe down the line, like at the end of the year. But as far as WrestleMania goes, absolutely not. Next up is Nathan Fraser. He's on the bench. I don't see any of the Smackdown men's tag teams making the card. Next up is Nia Jax, similar to Lash Legend, 100% a lock. They're walking into Mania as champions. Nikki Cross, I think, is on the bench. I don't think she's had a match in years. Piper Niven, unfortunately, out with an injury. I think she is on the bench. Randy Orton, 100% a lock. It's going to be him versus Cody for the world title. Next up is Rey Fenix, who I think is interesting. I want to say on the bench because WWE's doing nothing with him right now, but his brother Penta is the IC champion. I could absolutely see him face Penta for that title. That's a big match, considering that Rey Fenix competed at WrestleMania last year. Granted, he was a last-minute sub, but still. I could also maybe see Rey Fenix get involved with the Grande Americano stuff since he faced him last year, but to me, it's either he goes after his brother for the IC title or he's just not on the card. So I'm going to say long shot because I could see them doing that even though he's on the opposite brand. I don't know, Penta versus Rey Fenix maybe is the biggest match you could do. It could just be a loving brother versus brother, let's just have some fun and go at it match. Penta can retain, and then after, eventually down the line, Penta can lose the title, and then him and Rey Fenix can form a tag team finally. Next up is Rhea Ripley, 100% a lock. Her versus Jade for the world title, and then Roman Reigns, 100% a lock. It's going to be him versus Punk in the main event of night 2. All right, Sami Zayn is up next. I don't think he's going to be added to Cody versus Randy. I don't think he's going after the US title. To me, the only option is the current reported plan of Sami Zayn versus Trick Williams, where Trick is going to basically be the babyface and Sami is going to be the heel. Or they're going to walk in with Trick as the heel, Sami as the face, and over the course of that match, they're going to switch. I think it's very likely that WWE does that as a mid-card match, so I'm going to put Sami Zayn in very likely. although he is kind of teetering on long shot. Next up is Santos Escobar on the bench. Next up is Shinsuke Nakamura, who honestly I thought Gunther could have retired at WrestleMania this year, because during the whole AJ Styles retirement stuff, Shinsuke did do a social media post where he said retirement's not too far away for him either. And honestly, I think he is a perfect guy to just basically be fed to Gunther, similar to AJ and Cena. But I feel like WWE is going to do Gunther versus Rey. That's the bigger match. Hopefully Rey does not actually retire. So because of that, Shinsuke, I think, is on the bench. Solo Sikoa, Tala Tonga, and Tama Tonga, I think they're all going to be on the bench this year. I do not see the MFTs or the Wide Six getting involved at Mania. Similarly, I'm going to say Tonga Loa as well. And then, you know what, Uncle Howdy, I see you too, on the bench. The Miz, I do think, is going to be on the bench as well. I don't see him having a match at WrestleMania. He'll probably just have a backstage segment. All right, now we get to Tiffany Stratton, who lost the Rumble and lost the Chamber, so she's not going after a world title. I don't see her going over to Raw to do anything there, nor do I see her doing anything with the women's tag title scene, because she's not in a tag team. So to me, there are two options for Tiffy time. One is she challenges Julia for the Women's US Championship. However, according to reports, that match is going to be Io versus Julia instead. And to be honest, I think that is a bigger match than Tiffany versus Julia, given that Io and Julia has been teased a few times already, and the two of them wrestle a similar style. Could Tiffany get involved in that and make it a triple threat? Sure, but I don't think that's a lock. Also, I could see Tiffany versus Chelsea Green if Chelsea's healthy in time, but is that match for certain? No, I think that's also a long shot. Other than those two options, I don't know what Tiffany does at WrestleMania this year. So because of that, I have to put Tiffany Stratton in a long shot, which is crazy because last year she was competing against Charlotte Flair for the world title, and this year she is on the WrestleMania 42 poster. She was given her own specific commercial, but when I look at all of the matches that WWE can do, I don't see how Tiffany makes the card. So at this point, similar to LA Knight, I think it's a long shot. Next up is Trick Williams. I'm going to say very likely. I think him versus Sammy makes a lot of sense this year, but you could also do Trick versus Carmelo Hayes for the US title, and you could also just do Trick versus Melo for the US title, although I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to do Trick versus Sammy in a mid-card match, and Trick is so over. I think they want the entire WrestleMania crowd going whoop that Trick. That is going to be huge for them. And lastly is going to be Zelina Vega, who I think, similar to Aleister Black, will be on the bench. Just so you know, there's a lot of NXT people on this list as well. All of them would be on the bench, so I'm just gonna end the video there. And there you go, there's my final ranking of every WWE superstar and their chances of making the WrestleMania 42 card. What do you think of my ranking? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.